Good morning to everybody here. I think they rang the bell and it's 9:45, so we will get started. Clay is preaching somewhere else, I think in Ohio, I forget. He probably said last week where he was going to be, I just forget where it was. So he's not here today, so I'm filling in for the second time, and I always appreciate the opportunity that Clay gives me to fill in, because it pushes me to study. That's probably the biggest reason why I enjoy doing it. It makes me get back into the Word and think through things. And we're going to be talking about giving today in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 1 through 15. This is lesson 8 of the fall quarter, so we are over halfway through the fall. Hard to believe it's October 20th already. I know you're like me. I feel like September was gone in a heartbeat, and October is flying by as well. So November and the holiday season are coming quickly. We've talked about giving recently in our worship hour. I think Brandon had a lesson on giving here in the last month. So this is a topic fresh on our minds. It's not... he talked about Greg giving him the difficult topics to speak on, and I think he has had some difficult topics if you think back through and giving is sometimes a difficult one too. I don't think people like to be, I know if you're like me, you don't like to be people knocking on your door asking you all the time to give more money for something. And we have lots of things nowadays that come up that, that take a hit on our pocketbooks anymore. So one thing I saw something yesterday about a site where you can log in and it will tell you all the things that you're signed up for on a continual basis that you're getting billed for, like all these streaming services. And I think I need to do that and figure out where money's just flowing out of my account now and I don't even realize it, because I'm sure there's stuff. I remember I got to get rid of Peacock, because I got that just for that Buckeye game. So things like that. So maybe think about that. If you got anything from today, think about that. Maybe you'll find some places where you can save some money. But we're going to read the passage first. I like to go ahead and read the full passage here. So this again, we're in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. We're going to read verses 1 through 15. And I use the New American Standard Bible as always. Now, brethren, we wish to make known to you the grace of God which has been given in the churches of Macedonia, that in a great ordeal of affliction their abundance of joy and their deep poverty overflowed in the wealth of their liberality. For I testify that according to their ability and beyond their ability, they gave of their own accord, begging us with much urging for the favor of participation in the support of the saints. And this, not as we had expected, but they first gave themselves to the Lord and to us by the will of God. So we urge Titus that as he had previously made a beginning, so he would also complete in you this gracious work as well. But just as you abound in everything, in faith and utterance and knowledge, and in all earnestness, and in the love we inspired in you, see that you abound in this gracious work also. I'm not speaking this as a command, but as proving through the earnestness of others the sincerity of your love also. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich. I give my opinion in this matter, for this is to your advantage, who were the first to begin a year ago not only to do this, but also to desire to do it. But now finish doing it also, so that just as there was the readiness to desire it, so there may also be the completion of it by your ability. For if the readiness is present, it is acceptable according to what a person has, not according to what he does not have. For this is not for the ease of others and for your affliction, but by way of equality. At this present time your abundance being a supply for their need, so that their abundance also may become a supply for your need, that there may be equality. As it is written, he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little had no lack. So we're going to kind of look at the passage not in a verse, kind of a verse by verse way, but I wanted to talk through some things, and when I offer opinion, I will tell you I'm offering opinion on things. So but I wanted to talk about collection itself. What was its purpose, how much to give, when do we give, what is our attitude when we give. I want to talk about those things that I think are important part of the topic in this passage. Now, from a contextual standpoint, we know that Paul's talking again to the church of Corinth. We're in Corinthians, and he is making he's pleading for them to take part in this giving, and we know that this is for the people of Jerusalem. Specifically, there was a need there, and so the people of Macedonia they've given beyond what would be expected. I don't know, whatever word you want to use, beyond their means to help the people. And he's asking the Corinthian people to do the same. And so that was the purpose specifically of the collection in this situation. And really, when you talk about giving in the New Testament, and I don't think this is controversial, but it was a special collection. When we see the talk about it in the New Testament, we're talking about this special collection for the church. But I think we can make the inference there that obviously we know from other passages that funds were needed for lots of other things. And so it was the church's tradition, it was the church's way of doing things when they met on the first day of the week. We see, and we'll look at some passages about giving on that at that time. So, but the giving we read about, and Paul's talking about in this situation, it was a special collection in this instance for those in Jerusalem who were in need. When we think about how much to give, we know from the Old Testament that there was, obviously in the Old Testament, giving, the idea of tithing, right? Giving a tenth of your harvest, a tenth of what you had, to support the priesthood, to support those that were in need. In the New Testament, we don't see any specific passage that indicates how much you give. We certainly see that the attitude that you're to have when giving, but we don't see a specific amount. So that's where it has to be something that you find in your own heart, and what you should be giving or what you should give. And that amount may be 10%, it may be 20%, it may be 3%. I'm not here to tell you what you should do there, but that's an amount that you have to come to an understanding of what is appropriate for you and what you feel is appropriate to give from that standpoint. And one of the points I like to make, though, in this situation, when we go back through one of the verses in this passage, is that it's certainly important to give monetarily. That's what we're talking about here, giving of our means to help support others. And I think of a recent collection we had specifically for those in need after the hurricane. I think that kind of a collection is very similar to what we're talking about in this situation of how we help others in giving. But I think we need to make sure that in giving that we just don't think about money, and we think about how we give our time and we give our talents to help support God's work. And there's a specific verse in this passage I believe kind of fits with that idea, because I think sometimes it's easy is the wrong word. We can kind of lean towards, maybe we know, hey, let's be honest, we know sometimes in churches who maybe is at a higher level financially than others. We know that. We know based on their business or those kind of things. And so maybe sometimes there can be expectation, or maybe there's a thought in your mind that, well, when I give to the church, it maybe monetarily is the way I do things, and that's how I give back. But I think we're all asked, obviously, to give of our means, but we're also asked to give of our talents and give of our abilities. So it's not just I can say that I gave all this money and therefore I've done my due diligence, I've done what I need to do for the church, and I don't need to participate in anything else. Or it can be the opposite end of, well, I I'm there at every activity and I'm helping do all these things, and so that's my giving, and I'm not going to give monetarily. I don't think that's the right either. I think, again, there's that balance of what we're supposed to do. So that's a little bit of an opinion there, but I think it fits with what Scripture says too, that we just need to be mindful of those things. And then when do we give? We'll talk about some of those passages again. Obviously, the first day of the week, when they met back then, we see from example, we see from other historical documents that was with the establishment of the church, people met on the first day of the week. And obviously they didn't have some of the things we have today in terms of giving. I mean, you had to be there present to give. Whereas today we kind of, can give online and give whenever almost. We can mail our check during the week or however. So some things a little bit different from that perspective, but I think that's not a huge issue to talk about, but I did bring that up. And what is our attitude when we give? We'll look at the obvious passage that all of us are familiar with in terms of the attitude when we give. One of the things I wanted to mention too is when you're giving, there should be thought behind it, and I'm not just talking about how much, but that's a big part of it. But I think you need to be planning. I heard a sermon years ago when I was in college, and a preacher talking about how he and his wife, they made sure they looked at their finances and they planned out, how they were going to give. And that was one of the first things, that was the kind of the priority in terms of when they looked at their finances, what they would do, is that was the first step. Okay, what am I going to do from that standpoint? And then everything else comes after that. So again, that's a point I think we can all take to heart and make sure that we prioritize our giving and our money and where that should go. So some thoughts and things there. I'll give one last thought as I begin here with just some musings, I guess you could call it. But it was always interesting to me to we give now. We don't pass anything around. So and even when we pass things around, I didn't look around to see who's putting something in and who's not. Honestly, I could only see in a couple rows beside me anyway. So there, you didn't really take note of who was giving, and certainly you don't have any idea how much. And I think, again, that's something within the heart of each person. So it's not my place to know those things, or certainly to judge on that. But if you look at giving, and if you look at giving in the Bible, you think of the story of the widow who gave all she had. Clearly, again, this was prior to the coming of the church, but there was visibility to what she gave. When I've been in Haiti on mission trips in the past and would worship with the church there, the giving is it's visible. It's not. They all have envelopes, and now you don't know what people are giving, but you know who's giving, which is interesting to me, because they have envelopes, and you, whatever you're giving, you put in that envelope, and there's not a basket passed. They literally, everybody walks to those, what we have in the back here. We have these boxes. There's a box up front, and everybody who's giving walks up and puts that in the box, so you know who's giving and who's not, which again was an interesting thing to me. And again, probably something cultural there too, but just something I found fascinating. So there's, everybody, it can be a little bit different in terms of the process of that. Let's get into some passages now as I stop talking and giving you just thoughts and opinion here. I want to look at some different passages, and this is when we were talking about the idea of why the collection. I look at this passage in Romans, and it talks specifically about Macedonia and Achaia here, and in perfect context for what we're talking about today. For Macedonia and Achaia have been pleased to make a contribution for the poor among the saints of Jerusalem. Yes, they were pleased to do so, and they are indebted to them. For if the Gentiles have shared in their spiritual things, they are indebted to minister to them also in material things. So perfect kind of understanding of this passage of these peoples and what they're doing and how they're giving specifically for the saints in Jerusalem. Yes, Betty? Yeah.
If a man can't work,
right.
You help somebody if they need it.
Right.
That's what I want to say. But something that I'm thinking about is a family who has a person who is capable, and this person depends totally on the family for their upbringing. So that's, I believe that the scripture teaches we have to take care of our own things. And so if you've got a person who's disabled,
Yeah.
and you're taking complete care of them, that's a part of giving, that you're taking the burden off the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking that sometimes I think we need to let people know if they're doing these things, there's only so much you can give.
Sure.
And you need somebody to take care of you.
Sure. And yeah. Well, I think one of the, and Betty's talking about, and I'm going to, again, sometimes it's hard because you can't hear and you try to interpret what somebody else says. So I always do my best to say it back and not take what that person's saying out of context. But what Betty was talking about was if let's say you're in a situation where you have a person or a family that they really can't take care of themselves, whatever the issue is. And if you're giving of your time and probably monetarily to help support that, then in some ways that impacts what you're going to give back to the church, I think is what you're saying. Because, and that makes total sense, because I think what you're saying is you're taking, the church kind of a responsibility they have to help that person. You're taking that upon yourself as a part of the church. So I don't disagree with you there, Betty. I think I got that pretty much right. And I think one of the things in this passage, when we go back and look at it again, in verse 14, we're talking about that Paul makes a point that when you're giving, recognize at some point you may be in need too, right? You individually who are giving, and you're not giving just so that, okay, I'm giving because someday they better give back to me, because I'm in need. But there is Paul talks about that, hey, some point you may be in need too. And so it's wise to be generous because someday you may need that generosity from someone else also. So I think that's part of the context of verse 14. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't disagree. It's a blessing that we can serve others in that way. Totally agree. And then Galatians 6:10, again, why we give. So then while we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who are of the household of the faith. The reason I brought this passage in there too is that first and foremost, if you look at this collection, when you think about it, this is going to the saints in Jerusalem, right? This is going to the Christians there. So it is our responsibility first to take care of those of the household of faith. So if let's say, God forbid, we had a horrible tornado that ran through, I'm not going to use hurricane because that's not really a possibility here, but we could get remnants of it, obviously, but let's say a tornado went through and impacted a huge swath of our congregation. If it went right through, I don't know, where a lot of people live in the Hilliard, Dublin area probably, okay? And it impacted those folks, wherever it is. Then first, our responsibility is to help those of the household of the faith, right? It's help our brothers and sisters in Christ. Now, then we're supposed to do more. I truly believe we're supposed to reach out and help others too. There's no question about that. But that's going to be our first responsibility with whatever our collection that we have is. So important to recognize that. then I want to talk a little bit about, okay, we talk about special, this was a special collection, but we clearly read from lots of passages that those who were delivering the message, those who were proclaiming the word, needed supported to do that work. We take it in today's world, obviously we have multiple men that work with us in a manner of whether it's preaching, teaching, whether it's outreach to our college campus, whether it's with our youth. We support those men financially, and there's clearly, to do that, there has to be some funds that are put together to help do that. And so you look at this passage from 1 Corinthians where Paul says, if we sowed spiritual things in you, is it too much if we reap material things from you? If others share the right over you, do we not more? Nevertheless, we did not use this right, but we endure all things so that we will cause no hindrance to the gospel of Christ. Do you not know that those who perform sacred services eat the food of the temple, and those who attend regularly to the altar have their share from the altar? So also the Lord directed those who proclaim the gospel to get their living from the gospel. So giving we have other things, and Chad Ramsey, who writes the booklet that we use, talks about, as a church, we have many different needs that we have to meet. And so where do we get those funds? Well, where they're not coming out of the air. We're not a business that's producing some product that we sell that gets us funds to support those things. It's going to come from the body. It's going to come from the members of the church. A few more passages that are kind of not random, but I don't want to take them out of context, but they're just individual verses from a few different places. Galatians 6:6, the one who is taught the word is to share all good things with the one who teaches him. 1 Timothy 5:17, that should say 17 and 18. The elders who rule well, here's an interesting one. The elders who rule well are to be considered worthy of double honor, especially those who work hard at preaching and teaching. For the scripture says, you shall not muzzle the ox while he is threshing, and the laborer is worthy of his wages. To me, and again, you can disagree with me on this, but this is obviously it's talking about elders, and I think we're talking about the office of elder here, and that, in some instances, these elders are doing a lot of the teaching, preaching, the work there. It's not unreasonable to consider giving them something financially to help support them. I've never been in a church situation where elders were, at least to my knowledge, I've been around for a while, but where elders were given money as part of the work they do. But I'm not advocating for that today. So if you're an elder out there, I'm not saying, Audrey, we should start paying you a salary. However, there's nothing, I think in certain situations you have, small churches where they're at least blessed to have men that are capable and, qualified to serve as elders. And if they are doing a lot of, having to do a lot of that teaching, preaching, and a lot of that work, it's not unreasonable. And I don't think it's certainly not unbiblical to consider supporting those men in that fashion. Stuart. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe he's had to give up, he's doing some other thing part-time now or whatever. Again, just not to create, I'm just creating a little bit of thought in your mind here too, but things I think are maybe we don't give as much consideration to in our current situation, but in other situations, they may need to give consideration to that. And then who at any time serves as a soldier at his own expense? This is 1 Corinthians 9:7. Who plans a vineyard and does not eat the fruit of it, or who tends a flock and does not use the milk of the flock? So again, just passages that talk about, hey, we have to support those who are feeding us with the word. We have to help them. I'm a preacher's kid. My dad was a preacher he still preaches, but not full time. But you know what? Somebody had to help us, get along. And we were fortunate to be very much helped and blessed by churches never were in, certainly never in need of anything. I was never in want of anything either. So very fortunate from that standpoint. And then just a passage about kind of when, we mentioned this earlier. Now, this is 1 Corinthians 16, 1 and 2. Now, concerning the collection for the saints, as I directed the churches of Galatia, so do you also. On the first day of every week, each one of you is to put aside and save as he may prosper, so that no collections be made when I come. Again, simply put, this was the first day of the week. This is when Christians met. That was a time where you're going to have an opportunity to put your funds together and have somebody manage that and decide where it needs to go. And then as he may prosper, obviously what you give is going to depend on how much you have or how much you make. And again, I'm not telling you what you need to give or percentage of your giving. There's nothing in the Bible, in the New Testament, I see that indicates that. So you're going to have to make that decision for yourself. You're going to have to pray about it. You're going to have to think long and hard about it. But you know, it is different for each individual. And let's talk about that attitude. I'll get you 1 second, Susan. Now, 2 Corinthians 9, 6, 7. Now this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must do just as he has purposed in his heart, not grudgingly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. We've heard this passage. Obviously, we've heard that if we've grown up in churches, we've heard this so many times, and it's clear that what our attitude needs to be. It's not and this is where I think the planning aspect comes out in your giving. You need to give forethought to it. It's not a haphazard, here comes the plate, ooh, grab my wallet and well, what have I got in here? I've only got 2 20s and a 5. I'll give the 5 today. That's not the way it's done, right? I mean, it's purposeful, right? And you have to have thought through it. And that's where I think there's a planning aspect of how you do it. Verse 6, I mean, I'm not a health and wealth gospel person, but we know that, again, this idea of, we reap what we sow. So I'm not saying that you give money and something's going to happen and you're going to make, double your money the next day or something like that's happening for you. But I'm just saying we do reap what we sow, and we need to think through that as well. Susan, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. 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 Right. Yes.
If we can't even give a certain level on the thing that everything we have is given us, we can't examine ourselves to go, why is that a struggle? And that's just something I wanted to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a big thing. I wrestled with, and I get that. I appreciate you saying, I'll say, I'm not very appreciative. So
Yeah.
because it does reward us in ways of one thing, whether it's in this topic or others.
Right.
When we do the right attitude, we will gain
Oh, definitely. Yeah. 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 And good thing Susan's voice, I think, can be heard pretty well, because that's a hard for me. But I think that the overall intent is that you really got to look at the heart, Susan, because I think that's, again, that's a very simplistic look at what you just said. But you've got to really look at your heart about how you're going to give. And you struggled with a lot of these things in terms of the amount, I think, is part of it, and where to go there. But ultimately, you got to pray about it. You've got to figure out in your heart what's right for you. In terms of the giving, because, and again, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but again, that there's not, as you said, there's not any kind of specific level there that says what we've got to give. There's not a 10%, there's not as you said, maybe that's the starting point, right? Maybe that's where we should be thinking, but ultimately you've got to figure that out in your heart, what is right for me, and then give with that right attitude. I want to, yes.
It's a congregation we belong to, circulating book written by a guy.
Okay.
Claim that if you're having trouble in your life financially, it's because you're not giving enough.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with that one. And he's talking about a book that talked about, if you're struggling financially in your life, it's because you're not giving enough financially to the church. But right. Yeah. 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 No, and Jack's just saying, if you're giving just out of an attitude of, well, I'm going to get back more, then that's not the right attitude to have. I want to go back and look at the passage one last time in our last 15 minutes, just to kind of wrap up again and just look at it, not necessarily in depth verse by verse, but just to read it and think through it again. Now, brethren, we wish to make known to you the grace of God, which has been given in the churches of Macedonia, that in a great ordeal of affliction, their abundance of joy and their deep poverty overflowed in the wealth of their liberality. That's a little bit of a paradox, right? In their deep poverty, they overflowed in a wealth of liberality. For I testify that according to their ability and beyond their ability, they gave of their own accord, begging us with much urging for the favor of participation in the support of the saints. So they went above and beyond. As if you could give 110%, I'm not 100, by the way, I never say 110% because you can't give more than 100%. You can't give more. But if you were going to use that phrase, you'd say they gave 110% here. And they were trying to do is they were begging to be involved. They wanted to be involved. And this not as we had expected, but they first gave themselves to the Lord and to us by the will of God. And that's where I made that, to me, this is an inference. I didn't look at any commentaries to see what they're saying, but if you don't give yourself to the work of the church, to the Lord first, that to me, that's first and foremost. And then comes the giving monetarily, because again, giving monetarily is not your way out of serving God and other ways. I don't think if I walked in and I put a $10,000 check in there and I said, I'm done for 3 months or 6 months, I'll be here, but I don't need to do anything else. That's not what we're talking about here. You got to give yourself to the Lord. You got to use your talents and abilities. And then the monetary side of it is important too, but not one, this doesn't take away from the other, is what I'm saying. So he urged Titus that as he had previously made a beginning, so he would also complete in you this gracious work as well. We know from context that Titus had been there like a year prior. So think about this gift, this was a long process. We're not talking about like hey, when Ed, I know Ed takes care sometimes when we're giving these special gifts to disaster relief or whatever. It's not, hey, we've got 3 Sundays, give to disaster relief. This was like, this has been going on for a long time, right? This wasn't some sort of a 2-week, talk about giving to the Jews. I mean, they for whatever reason, they had started this process, but they had not been able to complete it. So Titus is back trying to say, hey, let's finish what you started. But just as you abound in everything, in faith and utterance and knowledge and all earnestness and in the love we inspired to, and you see that you abound in this gracious work also. So again, he's not giving them, hey, you got to be a Christian. You got to be like Jesus to others. And then you got to abound in this work of giving too. I'm not speaking this as a command, but as proving through the earnestness of others, the sincerity of your love also. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich. There's a great example of someone who was the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, and lived in this life essentially like a poor man, almost like a vagabond going here and there. I give my opinion in this matter. I like Paul because when he tells you he's giving opinion, he says he's giving opinion. For this is to your advantage, who were the first to begin a year ago, not only to do this, but also to desire to do it. So get it done. This is, and he doesn't say it in a harsh way here. He doesn't say, Corinthians, you guys are not getting the job done, so get it done now. He's not speaking to them in that term. He's doing this very lovingly and saying, hey, you guys started this great work and good job. You guys, but hey, finish it. Finish the work and get it. And Titus is coming back. He's going to help you get this finished. And now some people, he certainly wants to use the Macedonians as an example to the Corinthians. I don't think he's trying to, I just lost the term, but, kind of just make them feel bad because they're not like the Macedonians here. But and I don't think he's necessarily trying to say, make them always compare. You don't want to compare yourself all the time to someone else. But I think he's just saying, here's a great example. And hey, can you guys follow this example? Because these guys did it and they did it the right way. But now finish doing it also, so that just as there was the readiness to desire it, so there may also be the completion of it by your ability. So again, the project, the process was started. Maybe the attitude, maybe the desire, the work ethic has waned over the course of this time. But hey, let's bring it back up. Let's finish this. Titus is going to be there. They have a great relationship with Titus. Titus is going to help them get this accomplished. For if the readiness is present, it is acceptable according to what a person has, not according to what he does not have. For this is not for the ease of others and for your affliction, but by way of equality. At this present time, your abundance being a supply for their need, so that their abundance also may become a supply for your need, that there may be equality. So again, there may come a time in Corinth where you need the help of the Jews. You may of the Jerusalem church or whoever. And so this is, again, you're not giving so that they're going to give for you later on. That's not the idea here. But hey, you may have a time of need as well. And the idea is, as a body of believers, we help others in their time of need, and they're going to help us when we have our time of need. And if the last passage there, verse 15, specifically, he's reflecting back on the Old Testament where, when they had the manna and, it's all out there, and certainly older people are not going to be able to collect as much as younger people are but yet everybody put things together and nobody had lack. Everybody had what they needed. And that's the idea, is that, hey, we need to help. We need to have all things in common, kind of an idea that we see in Acts too with the early church. I think that's the idea there. So we got about 5 minutes. I wanted to kind of run through that again. I'll get to Phyllis here and a few others. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so some people decided to,
Right. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Right. 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 Yeah. Sure. Right. And Phyllis, again, I think most of you probably could hear, but she's just saying we give not just to pay the bills, so to speak, but that gift is to God too, because everything we have is from God. So another aspect of how when we give, looking at our hearts, not just the amount, but thinking about, reflecting on how all that we have is from Him. Betty.
he didn't want to, he was trying to start a competition.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. 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 Betty's just saying that Paul's not trying to create a competition between the churches of Macedonia and the church at Corinth, of Achaia. He's just advocating, hey, this is the attitude to have. This is what we need to do. It wasn't that he laid out, hey, Macedonia, $50,000, $50,000. Can he beat that? Can I get 55? Can I get 55? That's not what he did at all. There was nothing about that amount. But he mostly talked about they give, again, their heart. They gave beyond how generous they were. And can you have that same attitude and complete the work, finish the work? I think that's an important thing too. Get the job done. Sometimes works get started, and let's face it, you get started with anything and there's this, I'm so excited about this. I'm pumped and I'm going to get this done. And then those things can wane and wane and wane. And Titus is hopefully the guy to help get that attitude improved and make sure that this work is finished, it's completed. Anything else? Get you out after the first bell. I really appreciate the comments. I appreciate your participation, and I always appreciate the opportunity. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day, and if you're worshiping here, I think we start at 10:45.